What's going on, everybody? I'm Patrick from POWLAX, and this video is an excerpt from the Man Down Defenses video, and in this video we're going to be talking about the box and surprise lock man down defense. Before we get started, make sure to check out the brand new POWLAX and POWLAXmastercoach.com, where you can download and print the playbook PDFs that accompany over 50 POWLAX videos by becoming a member and supporting this channel. The new site has been streamlined to make navigating, watching, supporting, and downloading the POWLAX content simple and straightforward. We also broadened our membership categories to allow annual and program-wide memberships. Also, make sure to check out the POWLAX Teespring store, where you can get POWLAX hoodies, t-shirts, tank tops, mugs, even phone cases, and you can customize them to fit your team's colorway. Finally, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow POWLAX on all these social media sites. Now let's get back to the video. The next man down defense that we have is a box and surprise lock. Now this is different from a box and one or a four-man rotation with a lock off in the fact that we're going to surprise the offense with the lock off. And so a ton of different teams run this man down defense. I first really noticed it when I watched Richmond do it against Duke, because when I first was researching this video, I wanted to see who the best man-down defensive teams were, and Richmond was third in 2019. So I had some video on them, and I wanted to check that out. And so as I watched them do this against Duke, I really noticed how a lot of other teams are doing it, and we're going to go over an example of High Point doing it against Maryland. But so the reason why you would run the box and surprise lock are the following two basic things. First, as the play begins and the whistle is about to blow, all of the offensive players are going to watch and kind of like see exactly how the defense is set up and try and get a gain on kind of what exactly they're doing so that they kind of know what's coming. Like, if nothing is out of the ordinary, they're not going to think anything different, right? But so then as the whistle blows, we are going to lock off one of their players. Now, it's probably going to be one of their best players, the player who we think is either going to score or is going to be the player who's going to feed. And so anything that the offense was learning prior to the whistle blowing is now going to be over because we have just locked off one of their best players who's probably going to be an initiator, right? And in the high school and especially the youth ranks, if you take away that one really good player, they're not going to be able to do too much against your four poles. And that's the second thing is, I would almost rather play 4v5 with four poles against 5 shorties than I would play 6v5 with 4 poles and a shorty versus their 6 shorties, because that short stick is very limited in the fact that he doesn't have that reach that all of the other poles have. The other thing is, during practices, if you don't have time to have your defensive midfielders really practice the man down, but you have time when you're training your defensemen to make all the defensemen do it, that's a great way of just having a wrinkle where you're going to lock a player off with one of your defensive midfielders because they're obviously athletic and they can obviously lock someone off because it's really easy. And then your defense can actually train the four-man box with the rotations that'll come behind it. And so now we're going to go over an example of High Point running this against Maryland. In our example of High Point versus Maryland, High Point wanted to lock off M2 up top. I want to say it was Connor Kelly. I'm not actually sure. But so what's going to happen is, as Maryland's kind of looking at this, they're kind of seeing, okay, they're probably in a house. They could be in a 5-man rotation based on how they're set up around the field. Now, as the ball begins with A1 side left here, and he passes the ball up to M3, to M2, to M1, down to A3, they're then going to run a 3-man wheel with A2, A3, and M1 on this side. We're going to get to that once we kind of reset the board. But so right as the ball is passed to M2 and then M2 moves the ball, DM1 immediately runs out to go lock him off. And so on this side, you see the LSM kind of play him, and then the LSM kind of gets in a little bit because now D3 can play M1 and D2 is coming out to play A3, and D1 gets in to play A2. Also, these players obviously don't hang out way over here on the side of the field. They kind of move in as well. But so now M2 drifts into space over here, trying to kind of get open as the wheel starts, which we'll see, and DM1 just kind of locks him off. Now, If you're in that lock off position, just before we get into this, you are face guarding them. If they're standing right in front of you, you are standing in their face the entire time. You're not looking at anyone else. You're not worried about anyone else. The only thing you're doing is locking that player off and not letting them catch the ball. You have to let them move, but you don't have to, you're not worried about having to slide or rotate to anybody else. So now once the ball hits A3, they're going to run a 3-man side wheel. So A3 is going to carry up the side, and one's going to cut the middle, and then A2 is going to kind of pop out to the pipe area right here. Now, as that happens, you'll see D2 kind of plays A3 the whole way, and you can totally tell that A3 is trying to look up to hit M2. That's where his look usually is, and if he throws up to the top center where this player would usually be if he wasn't locked off, now he's got vision to see the whole field. I really love this place in the 3-3, and you can see that in any of the 3-3 videos. Now, because he doesn't have that ability, he then pulls D2 out and then throws back to A2. Now, here's where it gets into the box versus 4-man rotation aspect of the box and surprise lock. Instead of just automatically rotating D1 over, D1 actually shows into space here and allows D2 to get back down to him. And so now you've got A2 here with the ball, and that's totally not what they were thinking was going to happen based on how they began the play. Like, I'm sure that they thought they were going to run this 3-man side wheel, throw up to top center, and then he could have his looks through. Now, what ends up happening here is the ball is then just passed back up to A3, across to M3, and now if you can envision the box moving from out here and then back, a bunch of space is created inside for M1. And so as the ball swings, D2 has to come back inside, and as he does that, he's just not quite quick enough, and the same thing as kind of that Duke play happens, where as the ball is then thrown inside and it's covered up pretty well, the player drops it and ends up kind of scooting around on the floor for a while. Then Maryland actually picks it back up. But by the time they get back up into their series, there's not enough time left in the man up and they kill the penalty. Before we get into the High Point versus Maryland example, I want to show you Maryland versus Towson to show exactly why High Point decided to lock off the player who was top center. Notice that as the ball swings to the bottom right, Maryland runs a 3-man wheel and then immediately throws the ball to top center. Once the ball is top center, this player has the ability to throw relatively easy passes to any other offensive location on the field. Here, he throws right back to a nice step down on the right side. Now, in our example of High Point versus Maryland, notice that once this player passes the ball, the High Point player immediately runs out to face guard this player. As they run their 3-man side wheel, now there's no way for them to throw up to top center to have all of these great looks. The ball is thrown back down to the pipe, back up to the wing, across the field, and then into the crease where the player drops the ball. I think the main key here is not that we know what our opponent is going to do and therefore we know which player we're going to lock off. It's more of the fact that we don't think our opponent has taken the time to understand how to attack 5-on-4 without one of their best players. If we could locate one of their best players and lock them off during their man up, it's definitely going to take them out of what they're trying to do. Another really quick thing that I want to point out that I didn't as I went through this is that as A3 is passing the ball to M3, DM1 actually kind of sits in here and almost tries to interrupt the play. That's another thing we were trying to figure out with our youth team here, is we were trying to figure out how to have him go lock someone and then actually get back into the play to play even, right? If you lock him off and he leaves the play, if then he's out of the play, you can then pull your player in and play 5v5, but then lock him off if he comes back in. It's kind of a tough thing to decipher, but a lot of times you'll see a player who's locked off. If the offensive player is close enough to the play, they'll actually try and stay in the play and kind of disrupt the pattern anyway, even though they're also locking a player off. In our first example, we actually get an interesting situation where the refs actually blow the whistle, then blow it dead. And you can tell that the player who is going to go lock off the lefty attackman is kind of frustrated because Richmond tipped their hand by moving out to lock him off and then play stopped again. But you can also tell that this player is very frustrated because he knows he's going to get locked off. Now, as they play, the locked off player goes to move towards the midline. And as he does that, the player who's locking off actually gets a nice check on the ball. He doesn't cause a turnover, but it's definitely a circumstance where he could have caused a turnover. The ball swings around, Mount St. Mary's takes a shot, he hits the side of the net, and they kill the penalty. In this next example from the same game, Richmond once again moves to lock off this lefty attackman. Now, because of the lock-off, this player moves out to the side of the field, and Mount St. Mary's sets up a 5 on a die to attack the 4 poles. Now, once the locked-off player is on the edge of the field, that does free up the player locking him off to actually move in to play in a 5-on-5, because the player that they locked off is standing at the edge of the field and is no longer dangerous. This isn't something that you'd always want to do, but it is kind of a fun little tactic that can mess with the man-up offense. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Definitely let me know what you guys thought down in the comments section. I hope that after watching this, you feel more competent about how you understand man-down defense and feel that you can make the best decision for your team. Make sure to check out the brand new POWLAXmastercoach.com, where you can now watch, support, and download all of the POWLAX content. We're kind of getting away from the Patreon third-party stuff. I built an entire website dedicated to all of the POWLAX content that you can now actually support for $5 a month and download all of the content in a much easier to navigate and view way. So definitely check out POWLAXmastercoach.com. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, check out the POWLAX Teespring store, where you can buy a bunch of POWLAX merch and show your support in your local community. Finally, make sure to follow POWLAX on all types of social media. We've got a TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We like to post at least once a day, maybe twice. Sometimes we kind of miss a day here or there, either way. But so make sure to follow us on all of social media to stay involved. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next one.